everyone, welcome back to my channel, Everlynn's Books and Tea. I can't believe that we are almost all the way through October. I'm recording this on October 31st and tomorrow is November, so what that means is that it's time to choose our November TBR. I did pretty well with my October TBR. I definitely did not get to every prompt, but I am happy with the books I got to and that I read. But now we gotta see what we're gonna read in November, and to do that, we'll be playing our November TBR game. Now, just a disclaimer, this will be actually the second time I'm playing this game today because the first time I forgot to hit the record button, and I'm a little bit disappointed because I actually had an amazing TBR. So hopefully this TBR will be just as good as the one I just got now that I have to start over again. But I did hit the record button this time. I have double checked. So we are ready to get this game going, and let's see what we get on this TBR list. For those who haven't seen me play this game before, this is the game board we'll be playing on. Obviously, we're in November, so we're still in autumn, so we'll be using our autumn game board. We'll be rolling the dice, and each of the circles on the board correspond to one of these bags back here, which are all filled with different types of prompts, and I'll explain those as we grab each bag and choose a prompt from them. But we'll be rolling the dice 7 times, and we'll be choosing 2 books for each prompt. One will be a physical book, and then the other will be a electronic book. So I guess it's time to get this game started and see what our first roll and first prompt is going to be. All right, so for the first roll, we rolled a 6. And that places us on the brown circle. So the brown circle corresponds to this bag here. I know the bag itself is not brown, but the owl is. So this is my favorite bag. This is the bag that changes every month. It has prompts that have to do with the season, which will be fall. Prompts that have to do with the month, which will now be November. And then it also has prompts to do with the 2 astrological signs in November, which are Scorpio and Sagittarius. So let's see what our first prompt of the game is. All right, we got a fall prompt, and the prompt is it has to have red, orange, or yellow on the cover. All right, I think we can do this. I love the color cover prompts. So let me look through my books, and I will be right back. Before I get to the rest of this prompt, I did want to show you the 2 new books I'm adding to my physical bookshelf this month that I bought in October. We have The Court of Shadows by Victor Dixon. This is a historical vampire novel that features Louis XIV, who was the king of France. And in this book, he becomes the king of shadows when he becomes the world's first vampire. And then we have The City of Dusk by Tara Sim. This features the 4 realms that all converge on the City of Dusk that used to be ruled by the gods, but the gods no longer find favor for the city, and the 4 heirs of the 4 realms now have to come together to save their city. So these are 2 more books that we'll have to choose from on our TBR, for our TBR. So I did find several books that featured red and yellow on the cover. Again, we do have The Court of Shadows by Victor Dixon, so this can be an option. We have Spellbreaker by Charles Holmberg, so this has yellow on the cover. This is a fantasy about a world where people can either cast spells or break them. And it features orphan Elsie Camden, who is one of those that can break spells, and she meets up with elite magic user Bacchus Kelsey. And together, they try to figure out why wizards are being murdered. And we got Jewels of the Sun by Nora Roberts, features yellow. This is a romance book set in Ireland that features June Murray, who is an American who flees to Ireland to live in Fairy Hill Cottage, where she wants to learn about Irish folklore. And then Aidan Gallagher, who just recently returned to Ireland from his travels and happens to be an expert on the folklore of his country. They meet up in his family's pub, and he teaches her kind of the legends of his land, and, they end up falling in love, etc., etc. So that will be our third option. And then our last option is The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Adai. And this book I've actually read before, but I want to read the rest of the series, so I wanted to reread this before I got to the rest of the series. But this book features a girl named Shazi who is determined to discover why the brides that the ruler of her land, why they end up dead the morning after they marry the 18-year-old caliph. So she's determined to figure out what is going on there. So out of these 4 books, I'm going to start with an easy one since this is the first book that we're choosing. And I'm going to go with Jewels of the Sun by Nora Roberts. It's a fun, cozy romance. And I love romances set in Ireland. So I think this will be a good way to start this TBR, just knowing I have a quick read on it that I can get to and read at any time. That will be our first physical book. Now we have to look at our electronic books and find books that have red and yellow or orange on the cover. So there are a lot of books that have red, orange, and yellow on the cover, but I'm actually going to choose Small Kingdoms by Anastasia Hobbit. And the reason I'm choosing this is it's the book that I have on my Around the World series for the month of November. Each month I choose a random country and I have to choose a book that's either takes place in that country or is written by the country's author. And for November, the random country was Kuwait. And this book takes place in Kuwait between the 2 Gulf Wars. And it follows a bunch of different peoples whose lives are affected when they discover that there's a Indian housemaid who is being abused by her employer. So we'll add Small Kingdoms by Anastasia Hobbit to our TBR list for the month of November. All right, so now it's time to do our second roll of the game. So for our second roll, we get a 3. And that takes us again to a brown circle. All right, so we are on brown again, so we'll be choosing from the same bag. So let's see what we get for the second prompt for November. All right, I believe this is a prompt that has to do with November, and it is. So a book that starts with either a V or a W. Let's see what we have to choose from. So I found 2 books to choose from. The first is Whitethorn Woods by Maeve Binchy, which obviously starts with a W. I think I've spoken about this book in past videos, but basically this is a book that takes place in Ireland in a town where there are people, where a new highway is being built, and the highway is going to go through this old well that has historic significance, and it's about the townspeople and what side of this conflict they are on. That's the first option. And then our second option is Wind in the Door. I know it starts with the A, but I don't count A or the in these types of prompts. So this is the second book in the Time Quintet, the first one being A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L. Engel. I did manage to read A Wrinkle in Time in October, and it was a nice quick read, a fun read as well. And this is obviously going to be the same. So this book is actually about Meg Murray and her little brother, Charles Wallace, who falls deathly ill, and she needs to save him. So between these 2 books, I think I am going to choose A Wind in the Door. It's nice having kind of like a middle grade book on the TBR list because it's a quick read to get through. So we'll go with A Wind in the Door for our second prompt of the game. And then we got to figure out what book we're going to choose on our electronic TBR. So let's see what options we have for that. So I had several books on the electronic TBR that started with W, including War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Now, I can tell you for sure I am not choosing this book this month because I think it's like over 1,000 pages. And if I read this, it would probably be the only book I read this month. But that would be an option. The other options are Waystation by Clifford Simak. This is a science fiction book that was written back in 1960s. It follows Enoch Wallace, who served in the Civil War. And now he lives in his house where he hosts a bunch of unimaginable friends from the furthest stars after being recruited over 100 years ago by an alien named Ulysses. And now he keeps track of the progress of the Earth, and his charts have shown that his world is doomed to destruction, but the offer that his alien friends give him seem worse than the disaster that is to come. but then he learns even more about these horrors across the galaxy. So that would be the second option, Way Station. And then our last option is a historic fiction book. It's called The Wars of the Roses. This book is by Alison Weir. This book is set in the 15th century in England when the royal houses of Lancaster and York were locked in a battle for control of the British monarchy. It's one of the longest and most complex parts of British history and really altered the course of the monarchy. And this book kind of brings to life all the different historical figures who fought in it, from the queens to the nobles who carried this conflict down through the generations. So out of these three books, I think I am going to go with a historical fiction book. It's been a while since I've read one. So we'll put on The Wars of the Roses by Alison Weir onto our onto our November TBR list. All right, so it's time to do our third roll of the game. All right, let's see what color we land on for our third roll. Will it be brown again? That is the question. Here we go. Here we go, for real. All right, so for our third roll, we got 8. Let's see what color that is. Yellow. All right, so we didn't land on the brown circle for once. This time we landed on yellow, which is this bag here. So in here we have prompts that have to do with the plot of the book. We also have prompts that are miscellaneous, and then we have some series prompts, which are series I'm either in the middle of or ones I want to start reading. Let's see what we get for our third prompt. Okay, so for our third prompt of the game, we have read a book with magic. I like this prompt. This is like the perfect November prompt. We have plenty of books with magic. Now we just have to decide which one we're going to choose. So let me look through them and I'll be right back. So we have 2 books to choose from for this prompt of magic. The first is Spellbreaker by Charlie Holmberg. So again, this is a book set in a world where there are spellbreakers and spellcasters. Elsie, who's an orphan girl, happens to be a spellbreaker. She meets up with magic user Bacchus Kelsey, and between the two of them, they want to solve the mystery of why all these wizards are being murdered. And then our other option is Song of Silver, Flame Like Night. This is by Amelie Wenzhou. So this book is set in a world where magic has been outlawed. It follows a young girl named Wen, whose mother was murdered. Or I don't know if she was murdered, but she ended up dying. And at the time of her death, she marked her daughter Lan with a strange mark that was burned into her arm. But this mark only she can see until she meets up with this boy named Zen, who happens to be a practitioner. Oh my gosh. He's one of the fabled magicians of the Last Kingdom, and he recognizes this mark on Lan's arm, that it means that she's also a practitioner of magic and has a powerful ability. He's not sure what this means, so the two of them travel to the Last Kingdom, and there a battle starts that the two of them must fight to save the Last Kingdom. So that's our second option. I think I'm going to go with Song of Silver, Flame Like Night. This just, I don't know, this book just seems to have an interesting premise, and I love the cover as well. So I feel like I need to choose this book for November. It feels like I need to read it in November. So we are going to choose Song of Silver, Flame Like Night by Amelie Wenzhou. All right. And then next we need to choose a book from our electronic TBR. So I found 2 electronic TBR books as well that we can choose from. The first is The Librarian of Crooked Lane by C.J. Archer. And this actually features magicians. It follows Sylvia, who is a librarian, who then finds out that her ancestors may actually be magicians, but she's not quite sure whether she should believe that or not. She ends up meeting, I believe his name is Gabe, who's searching for a magician made painting, and in this process he actually ends up getting Sylvia fired from her job. Sylvia finds a new job at a librarian that houses magic books on magic, and she ends up teaming up with Gabe to not only find what happened to this magician made painting, but also to find out her history and if she actually is descended from magicians or not. So that's the first option. The second option is The Touch of Frost, which is a young adult book, fantasy book that's set in a academy. It's the first book in the Mythos Academy series by Jennifer Estep. It follows Gwen Frost, who goes to the academy, which is a school of myths, magic, and warrior whiz kids. And while there, one of the students, Jasmine Ashton, ends up being murdered in the Library of Antiquities. And Gwen Frost makes it her mission to figure out who murdered her and why. So those are the two options. I really actually want to read both of these books, but I think I'm going to choose Touch of Frost just because I love fantasy books set in schools, and I feel like especially for a November read, this fits into November really well. So we'll choose Touch of Frost, the first book in the Mythos Academy series by Jennifer Estep, as our third electronic TBR book. On to roll number 4. Okay. Time to see what we get for roll 4. We got a 2. And once again, we landed on a brown circle. So for our fourth roll, we once again landed on brown. So this will be our third time choosing from this bag out of 4. So this is my favorite bag though. I love that it has so many different types of prompts in it. So I'm not, complaining. Let's see what our fourth prompt is. So for our fourth prompt, we have a book featuring fairies, witches, or magic. So we have this prompt again before, but this is a little bit more of a wide range with witches and fairies. So we're going to keep the prompt and choose some books for it. So I'm going to choose between these two books here. The first book is The Secret Chapter, which is the 6th book in the Invisible Library series with Genevieve Cogman. I do love her books, and I love this series. I read the last one, the 5th book in the series, a couple of months ago. But this features Irene, who's a librarian in an alternative universe where there are multiple worlds, some ruled by dragons, which are orderly, some ruled by fae, which are chaotic, and the librarian's job is to kind of keep the peace between everything going on. So this would be our first option. And then our other option is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This was on my October TBR, but I actually ended up reading the Kindle choice for this prompt. But I really do want to read this because I've heard so much good things about it. This book is about Jude, who is 7 years old when her parents are murdered. She ends up being raised in the treacherous high court of the fairies along with her 2 sisters. They were stolen and raised there. But the fairies do not like humans. They despise them. And now it's 10 years later, and Jude wants to win a place at the court and has to kind of overcome this, overcome being human and win a place on the court. So these are our 2 options. I think I am going to go with The Cruel Prince by Holly Black because I really do want to read this. And since I didn't get to it in October, I'm hoping to get to it this month. So we'll add The Cruel Prince by Holly Black to our November TBR. Now let's see what books we can find over here that feature fairies, witches, or magic. So I found 3 books that match this prompt. The first is the one that we talked about before, and it's The Librarian of Crooked Lane by C.J. Archer. So this book obviously features magic as we used it for our magic prompt before. We also have War of the Fae, book 1 called The Changeling, which is a young adult book that features a 17-year-old and her best friend who are just, normal 17 years old until her and some of her classmates end up running away. They get kidnapped, end up in this forest, and realize things are not as they seem. It has fae in the title, so I assume it has fairies in it. And then the last is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which just came out this year. And this book features, obviously, Emily Wilde, who is interested in writing the first encyclopedia of fairies. She ends up going to this village where one of her rival researchers, Wendell Bamblebee, is. And he ends up getting in her way because he's much more good at talking to people and getting information from people than Emily is. But that doesn't stop Emily. And as she gets closer to uncovering the secrets of the hidden ones. She finds herself not only needing to unravel that mystery, but also the mystery of who this Wendell is. So I think I'm going to choose the Emily Wiles Encyclopedia of Fairies. I really want to read this book, and I love reading this type of book in November. So I think this is the perfect book for this prompt, so we will add that to our TBR. All right, it's time to do our 5th roll of the game. We'll see what color we land on this time. All right, so for our 5th roll, we get a 7, I believe. And we land, once again, on brown. So once again, we landed on brown, and it's time to choose from this bag for the, I think, 4th time this game. So let's see what we get for our 5th prompt of the game. To the bottom of the bag. All right, we got a prompt. And it is trees or leaves on the cover. All right, I think we can do that one. Let me take a look through our books and see which books we can choose from for this prompt. So I have 3 books that match the prompt where they have either leaves or trees on the cover. The first book is The Stolen Kingdom by Julian Boehm. So you can see there are lots of leaves on this cover. This follows Merilith, who is a vintner's daughter, and she has no idea that she has a hidden magical power that will allow her to make a claim on the throne. It also follows the king's second son, Alec, who is uncomfortable with his position as being the spare heir and with the dark magic that comes with it. Merilith ends up becoming embroiled in a plot that's to murder the royal family and seize the throne, and thus a cat and mouse game ensues. And this is a book that kind of has dark magic, royal intrigue, and forbidden love in it. So that's our first option. Our second option is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. So this is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, another good fantasy book to read in the fall. It's about Prince Ren, who in his 18th year is cursed to repeat the autumn over and over again. He thought he could be saved if he fell for a girl, but then he turns into a beast and destroys his castle, his family, and every last shred of hope. So this is our second option. And then our third option is also kind of a fairy tale book, and that is The Hazel Wood by Melissa Albert, which follows 17-year-old Alice and her mother, who have spent most of their life on the road, and then her mother is stolen away by a figure who claims to come from this world where her grandmother's stories are set, which were about kind of like dark fairy tales, and now Alice must rescue her mother. So those are the 3 books. You can see this one also has leaves on the cover, as this one has a tree. I don't know if I pointed that out before. These all kind of sound really interesting. I don't know which one I want to put on my TBR list. I think I'm going to go with, oh my gosh, the Hazelwood. Just because this has been on my TBR for longer than either of these 2 books, I believe. And I don't know, fairy tales in November just seem kind of nice and cozy. So we'll choose The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. All right, now we gotta see if any of these books have trees and leaves on the cover. So I found 2 books that have trees and leaves on the cover, and neither of them are fantasy. So these will be a little bit different books. The first is Defects. This is book 1 of The Reverians by Sarah Noffke. This follows 17-year-old M. Fuller, who's a new generation of dream travelers, but for some reason the gods haven't seen fit to give them all with the power, and M is one of those, which is known as a defect, which is a dream traveler not gifted with a psychic power. So because of that, she endures daily painful injections along with commands from her father in an attempt to earn her gift. But then a friend returns who she thought was dead, and with his return comes a lot of shocking and unforgivable truth that the society that she thought she was protecting has actually been betraying her. So that's the first option. The second option is a historical fiction book. It's called The Summer Queen by Elizabeth Chadwick. You can see that there are leaves on this cover. So this is book 1 of Eleanor of Aquitaine by Elizabeth Chadwick. It follows Eleanor when she is married at 13 to the young Prince Louis of France. And then a week after the marriage, she becomes a queen and her life kind of changes beyond recognition. So that follows that story. So I think between these two, I don't think I have that many historical fiction books on here. So I think I'm going to add The Summer Queen by Elizabeth Chadwick to this TBR. So now it's time to choose our 6th prompt of the game. So let's pull up the game board. And let's see what we get for our 6th roll. All right, so we got a 1. So we landed on yellow for the second time. This corresponds to this bag here, which has our plot prompts, some miscellaneous, and some series prompts in it. So let's get our 6th prompt of the game. There's a bunch of prompts. We're going to choose this one. And this prompt is a book that matches the current season. Perfect. So the current season is fall. So let's find a book that matches kind of like the fall vibes, if not set in the fall. So we are choosing this book. So I'm currently reading Truly Devious. I have, I think, like 50 pages to go, and I love the book. It was such a quick read, and I know at the end I'm really going to want to know what happens in the next book. So this is set at Ellingham Academy, and any book that's set in school always gives me the fall vibes, especially when it begins, you know, at the beginning of the school year, which is fall. So I think this is a perfect book for this this prompt. And I'm so excited to get it onto my TBR. That's why I can't stop smiling. So for those who don't know or haven't heard of this book is set in Ellingham Academy, which is up in Vermont. And many years ago, people were murdered, and the killer was never truly found. The person they caught, everyone believes didn't actually do it. And this book follows Stevie. I think her last name is Bell, who is a student at the school, and she is kind of like an amateur sleuth. She loves solving crime, and she went to the school to see if she can solve the murders that happened years ago and find out who the true killer is. So we will add The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson to our November TBR. All right, now let's see if we can find a book over here that matches the fall vibes. So I'm kind of going to go with the same idea for the electronic book and choose a book that's set at an academy, because academies, you know, I think of fall when I think of going to school. And this book is called Night School Genesis, and it's book 1 of the Night School series written by C.J. Doherty. This book follows Allie Sheridan, who is sent to the Samaria Academy, which is a boarding school, after she had been arrested once again. The school is one of those beautiful schools that are attended by ultra-wealthy teens. It takes place in England. But soon after she arrives at the school, she realizes that the academy is not what it seems, and that she also may not be what she thought she was. So we'll go with this book, The Night School Genesis by C.J. Doherty. And that will be our 6th book. So it's time to roll the dice for one last roll and see what our last prompt of the game is. All right, so for our 7th and final roll, we got a 7, and that will give us the color of brown. Somehow we started our game on the brown circle. Now we're ending our game on the brown circle. We landed on the brown circle like 5 out of the 7 rolls. I don't know what the chances of that are, but at least this is the bag that gets changed monthly. So let's see what our last prompt of the game is. All right. Oops. Our last prompt of the game is a paranormal book. All right. I think we can accomplish that. Let's see what we got. So I found 2 paranormal type books that we can choose from. The first is The Court of Shadows, which was in one of my subscriber box last year. This is by Victor Dixon. This is the book that follows Louis XIV after he is changed into a vampire. And then we also have Ghost in the Snow by Tamara Seiler Jones. This is kind of like a very unique fantasy thriller that kind of combines forensics, but it does feature ghosts, which are paranormal. It follows Dubik Briley, who's head of security at Castle Faldora, and he is able to see ghosts. And this book takes place when in the castle, a lot of servant girls are ending up dead, and now Dubik has been tasked with trying to figure out who's doing this and, you know, trying to stop it from happening. So those are the two options. I think I'm going to go with Ghost in the Snow by Tamara Seiler Jones. I'm just not in the mood for vampire story this month, coming off October, so we'll choose that one, and then we'll get to this book in another month. All right, let's look up here and see if we have any electronic books that match this prompt. So I don't have a true paranormal book up there. I think the closest one I could find is The Defects, which is that first book in the Reverian series by Sarah Noffke. Again, it follows 17-year-old M. Fuller, who is a new generation of dream travelers, but for some reason the gods have not gifted every dream traveler with a psychic ability, and M is one of them, and she's known as a defect. So this is the closest thing, since there's psychic abilities, which are, you know, kind of paranormal, that I could find. So we're going to use that for this prompt, and we will add Defects by Sarah Noffke to our TBR list. So that is our November TBR. I'm definitely excited for a lot of the books on this. I think this is as good as the first TBR game I did where I forgot to record it. So I'm definitely happy with this outcome as well. And let's go through these books and see what our final options for our November TBR are. So first up, we have a paranormal book. So we have The Defects by Sarah Noffke, and we have Ghost in the Snow by Tamara Seiler Jones. For a book that matches the current season, we have Night School Genesis by CJ Doherty, and we have The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson. Both take place at academies, which kind of match the fall season. For a book with leaves on the cover, we have the historical fiction book The Summer Queen by Elizabeth Chadwick, and we have The Hazel Wood by Melissa Albert. For a book featuring fairies, witches, or magic, we have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Follett, and we have The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Again, for a book featuring magic, we have Touch of Frost by Jennifer Estep, and Song of Silver Flame Like Night by Amelie Wenzel. For a book that starts with a V or W, we have The War of the Roses by Alison Weir, and A Wind in the Door by Madeline L. Engel. And then last but not least, for a book that has yellow, red, or orange on the cover, we have Small Kingdoms by Anastasia Hobbit and Jewels of the Sun by Nora Roberts. So there's my November TBR. I'm definitely excited to get to a lot of these books. There's a lot of good ones on this TBR, and I think November will be a good month. So for what's up on my channel, I'll be recording a kind of speed run wrap up for my October reads. And then I'll also later on in the month do a regular type of wrap up for both my September and October reads. And then I may try also to do a 48-hour readathon so I can get through some of these books, see how many I can get through in 48 hours. But I think that's it for today. If you have any thoughts about any of these books or have any ideas about which ones I should choose for each prompt, just let me know in the comments below, or if you read any of these books as well. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button, and I will see you around in my next video. Thank you for watching, and thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a good November. I will see you next time. Bye.